beloveds. This is Valencia Benavides, and I'm here with Kim Daniel. We are in for Cynthia Borsellino today, and just kind of talking about some God stories. And we've just been talking about thought about around, and it's biblical, around principalities, authorities, and principalities that are involved in the world at large, right, and also in our lives, and how that can manifest itself, and and sometimes how, obviously the Lord is working in those spaces too, and how that kind of that battle looks sometimes, and what shape that takes in our just daily lives. And Kim, you had a story about just a transitional space in your life where you experienced some of those things.
So I want to start off just reading out of Ephesians, starting with verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord, in the strength of his might, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. So I became a Christian at a time and in a church setting where the thought was that women shouldn't go to school.
Okay.
And out of high school, I chose not to go to college because I became a Christian as a senior in high school and felt that I really needed to grow in the Lord, because I was always interested in psychology, and I knew that if I stepped into that as a baby Christian, that it would be overwhelming for me.
Wow, that was
So that was a decision. I think the Lord gave me wisdom at that time.
Yeah, I would say,
but
it's impressive.
Then I got married, and my husband, along with the teaching of the church, was women belong in the home. They don't need to go get jobs. They don't need to go out and become educated. And my heart cried out to the Lord, and the Lord actually gave my husband a prophecy for me.
Oh, wow.
So it would not have changed his heart if the Lord hadn't given him the prophecy.
Right, yeah.
So spoke through him that not only would I go to school, but that it would be taken care of financially. And it was taken care of in a lot of different ways, but I did have grants and loans, but they're paid off now, which is wonderful. So they were, I didn't go into debt really deep during the process, but
Yeah.
I also didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I started taking classes at a junior college while my son was little. Then I had finished the 2-year program there and knew I had to make a decision. So my first decision was, am I going to work with kids, or am I going to work with business? Because we managed apartment complexes, and it made more sense to go ahead and step into the business part. So I was offered a position where I oversaw several different complexes, apartments, and I did that for a year, and it was like, nope, this is not where it's supposed to be. So I was just like, okay, Lord, now what do I do? I have to decide, where am I going to go? And felt again that it was with kids. So looked at maybe going back to school, but I knew that I'd have to step into the big college.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit timid, to put it mildly. I was basically fearful of stepping on the campus.
Okay.
Because it was so big. But because I knew that the Lord would open the doors up if it was right, I just waited, and fall comes around, and it's like December, and I have to make a decision. Am I going to go ahead and apply to the school? And it would have been the College of Education, or do I just stay where I am? And it was like, no, I was being pushed. I could feel it. The Lord was saying, step out, step out. So in December, I applied to the college. I gave my boss's notice so that it would happen. Um, it's not typical to be able to put your application in and have it accepted that quick.
Yeah.
I was ready to go in January. I had been accepted. The first semester, it was all education stuff.
Uh-huh.
But I also found out that I had fibroid tumors.
Oh my
I had
gosh.
gone to a gynecologist and she said, "Oh, are you pregnant?" And I'm like, "No." And she said, "Oh, okay." Did the ultrasound. I had a fibroid tumor about the size of a large orange. By the time they got to it, it was a grapefruit size.
Oh, wow.
And because I had worked, I had an insurance option to be able to pay for the whatever that's called, the backup insurance.
Yeah.
So it paid like maybe $300 and it covered the entire operation.
Oh, wow.
Did it the week of spring break, had a couple days after where I went back. The people that were teaching the classes were very supportive. And by the end of that semester, I had straight A's.
Wow.
So, I mean, the Lord just opened it up.
Yeah.
The timing of it was amazing. So I went on through that program. But when I was speaking with the TAs, the teaching assistants that year, it showed me that there was an area that I didn't even realize in psychology called school psychology. At that time, it was a fairly new direction that was being taught. And I thought, that's what it is. It's working with kids in psychology.
Okay.
So finished up my 2 years, and then I needed to try and get into the master's, or actually it was the doctoral program I stepped into. And I had to have things signed by certain people. And because I was waiting on the Lord, I would feel like now's the time to go. And I would go, and the right people were in the offices at the time I was there, which is very unusual, ready to sign off on me going into the program. I was accepted. So that was how I stepped into that part of the program. And I was confident that it was the Lord.
Yeah.
I mean,
doors were just opening. It was very
and
fluid.
it was very, very.
He does that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was an example of the protection of the Lord as I stepped out. But I also remember reading some books on spiritual warfare and recognizing that the powers and principalities, I was under the authority that the Lord had put me under, but I was also under his authority with all of these steps. Going into psychology and studying all of that, it was like I was very aware that it was an affront to who I was as a Christian. And I had a t-shirt that I would wear a lot of times where it had the fish going the wrong way up the stream of fish. And I would just, that's who I am, Lord. You let me swim upstream against all of the other fishes. And, I looked and researched Christian psychology as well as school psychology, just to have some background, and felt pretty comfortable about it. But then we also started looking at the spiritual warfare and battling those principalities and powers. And in doing that, it was very clear that you don't go against a power or principality unless the Lord gives you both the right to do it and the authority to do it. I mean, that's how it felt at that time.
Yeah. Absolutely. You can get yourself in hot water otherwise, right?
Yes.
Very bad. Heap a lot of problems on yourself.
So some of the books I read had stories of people who were in spiritual battles, and they were trying to figure out where they were coming from. One of them, there was a church that a lot of the women would get pregnant, but then they would lose their babies before they were born.
Oh, wow.
And they, asked the Lord, what's going on with this? Why is this happening? Why are we not bringing any babies to life?
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord showed them that they were being attacked, and because they weren't where the Lord had actually let them go, that attack was influencing them. So they looked at what they were doing, and as a church, they were fighting against abortion.
Okay.
And they were doing it in a way that really hadn't been given to them by the Lord.
Okay.
And that's the importance of knowing when you're fighting against these powers and principalities, has the Lord given you the okay? Has He given you that war or that battle to fight right now?
Right.
And when they realized that, as they tried to deal with the ungodly abortion,
Mm-hmm.
they had opened themselves up to that demonic power, principality, and it was affecting the lives of their entire church body.
Wow. That's
So
wild.
they pulled back from that, repented, and almost immediately babies started being born.
Wow. That's so
So
wild.
it really did. It was such a clear picture of when is it okay to battle? We know there's so much garbage, so much evil, but knowing who is the Lord giving you the mission with.
Right.
So,
because the authority is going to go with that.
yeah.
And if you're outside of that,
Yeah.
you can get yourself into a real bind.
So I knew that going into school, I had that authority and I was comfortable with it, even though there were times that I felt attacked.
Yeah, in academia, definitely. I've spoken about that too. In the sciences, in art, it's very well, it's not very pro God for sure, and not where I was going to school. So yeah, I experienced that too. But that's just a great reminder that as we step out in faith and things, that we need to be really hearing from the Lord before we take action, so that we don't kind of bring things unknowingly onto us. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story today. And if you would like to reach out to us, we'd love to hear your God stories. What are you learning about these things? Are you having any experiences about principalities? I feel like there's a lot of shift in the world, and we're probably all experiencing some of that all the time, but especially it seems churned up right now. And you can reach us at Beloved Unveiled at protonmail.com, Beloved Unveiled at protonmail.com. Thanks.